What's going on, y'all? If you are in a fantasy basketball dynasty league or considering joining one, or if you are trying to get ahead of your competition for the 2022-2023 fantasy basketball season, tune in for my early 2022-2023 player rankings for fantasy basketball. Today we are going to talk about the top 5 players in fantasy basketball. Let's get right into it. All right, y'all. So everyone has their method of ranking players. I like to consider several factors. Obviously, when it comes to the top dogs, there's not a lot to consider, or you should be considering when it comes to, say, the top 3 players, because it is what it is. And although we most may have our rankings slightly different, the top 3 players typically are the same, just in different orders. I like to look at, obviously, stats. I look at impact on the game. I also look at potential for the next season, destination, rosters. There are several things to consider when you're ranking players. And so my top 5 players are players who are difference makers. These guys will carry your team in fantasy basketball every day, because it's pretty much every day or every other day. They'll carry your team. When it comes to points, they're going to dominate in points. They may score enough points for 3 players on your roster. These guys have an impact on the game like no other, and they are the best players typically in the NBA. Let's talk about my rankings. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and also make sure your notifications are turned on as well, and you hit that like button. Now, I'm going to rank my players from 1st to 5th. So today we're doing 1 to 5, and then we'll do 6 to 10, and I'm going to do them from 1 through 5. I want my top dog known first. So let's get ready to talk about who I have ranked as the top guy. Now, there's no secrets. Nikola Jokic. There's no secrets. Joker is the top player in fantasy. He's my MVP in the NBA, and if there were fantasy awards, he would be my MVP in fantasy, because he's that dominant, and he's going to have an impact on the game in several different categories. And that's statistically, it's going to be points, percentage, shooting percentage, rebounds, assists, high impact on the game. Obviously, he's not going to do much when it comes to blocks. He'll get you a steal a game as well. But however, he's like a daggone point center. Is that a thing now? Yes. He's a point center who's going to shoot a high percentage from the field, and he's going to win you games. You may look at your point totals one game and see that he got you almost 70 points, and that is going to help your team. That's pretty much hard to beat. It's hard to keep up with someone who has a player like the Joker. Nikola is just dominant, and if you drafted him first in fantasy, you made the right choice. Now, this past draft in one of my leagues, I actually went with Luka, and that didn't work for me. Obviously, injuries, and again, Nikola is just that dominant, which is why he is number 1 on my list. 2021-2022 stats. He played 74 games, averaged 27.1 points per game, 13.8 rebounds per game. So he's getting you a double-double. There are some fantasy leagues that give additional points for double-double in a points, basically. So there you go. Right there. And he averages 7.9 assists per game, which is great. You're not seeing too many centers average almost 8 assists per game, let alone almost a triple double per game. The last 2 seasons, he has pretty much carried the Nuggets. He has pretty much been their center, their point guard, pretty much their playmaker, and not only from in the paint. Okay, he's not just posting people up. He is bringing the ball up the court and getting everyone involved on offense. He's initiating the offense, okay? You're not going to see a lot of centers doing that in the NBA. And if you have a center with a high usage rate like Nikola, and he is efficient, meaning his shooting percentages are really good, and he is impacting the game in other areas statistically, you have a player who's going to end up being most likely the number one player when you think about his stats. 58.3% from the field. That's amazing. 33.7% from threes. I would love to see him get that up to 37. That may be slightly hard, but I don't think so because he's such a really good shooter from the field. So it's not like it's impossible. 81% from the free throw line. So again, he has the potential to do so. Again, most people are not drafting their centers in fantasy to pretty much have a high 3-point field goal percentage, especially in a categories-based league. But his other stats will impact your team in a positive way. That the 33.7% from threes, it's not even going to hurt your team because so many other categories he's dominant in. 3.8 turnovers. You ain't going to see a lot of centers average that many, but when he is pretty much like your point guard and he's initiating the offense, which means he has the ball in his hands an awful lot, his turnovers will be slightly higher, and that's fine with me because, again, 3.8 turnovers is not really hurting your team when you figure he's almost averaging 30 points, almost 14 rebounds, 8 assists. It's not going to hurt your team as much. And then he's giving you 1.5 steals and 0.9 blocks. I want to see him improve a little bit on defense. I think that will be much better, right? Improve on defense. And you're still going to be number one. So, I mean, there's not a lot of flaws in this game. But if you were to say, hey, what flaws? It would be defense. Ranked number one, should be ranked number one this year. There are no surprises here with Nikola. He is the guy. If you're on a board with the number one pick, you take him in fantasy basketball. If it's your dynasty league and you want to start things off with Nikola, you do so. You're winning, okay? You want to have the best players in. Doesn't always mean this is the best player in the NBA because he's not the best player in the NBA. He's one of the best players in the league and one of the best centers in the league. But you do have to look at it from a fantasy standpoint, and he's dominant in fantasy in multiple categories. And this means your team is set up for success in a dynasty league, as well as whether you're drafting him in redraft, keeper, whatever you're drafting in whatever format. It's going to win you leagues, and you'll have the bragging rights that you deserve because you made a smart choice. Don't make the mistake of drafting someone else here, like I did. I did Luka. I was taking a chance. I think I was in my feelings about Luka because I'm like, well, I've never been able to get Luka, and I had high expectations for him. Didn't work out. But if I'm on that the clock again, and I'm picking Nikola all day, every single day. Coming in at number 2, the Greek Freak. That's right. Giannis is definitely a player that if you were to decide to go with him at number 1, if you're on the clock, I wouldn't be mad at you because his impact is the same as Joker. Every category is going to affect in a positive manner. It's always going to be positive. Obviously, the free throw percentage is not going to be that great, and he's not going to be a great 3-point shooter, but who cares when you have one of the best players in the NBA who is producing at a high rate in fantasy. He's a player you could look up, oh, he got me 60, 70, and then say you have other players in your starting lineup who didn't play well. His points will make up for someone who's just not performing well, which is why I have him at number 2. 2021-2022 season, played 67 games, averaged 29.9 points per game. He came on strong, missed some time with injuries, but he came on stronger than ever, and he did exactly what he was supposed to do, and we all expected it. 11.6 rebounds. So right then and there, you have a forward slash center who is getting you a double at a high rate. It's not 10 points, 10 rebounds. No, he's averaging almost 30 points per game. That is huge. And again, if you drafted him with the first or the second pick, you're not wrong here, okay? You made the right move. And again, in a dynasty league, if I'm on the clock, whether it's 1 or 2, then I'm not mad at you if you took the Greek Freak with the second pick. I definitely would take him with the second pick. There wouldn't be anyone else between the Joker and the Greek Freak at 1 and 2. And again, I do believe it's switched with some people with the rankings. But again, you're winning if you get one of these two guys in a dynasty, redraft, keeper. You're winning. And even in DFS, you're winning because they're going to produce at a high level. It's going to cost you a lot in DFS, but again, they are producing. If you can get 60, 70 points, you're like, ooh. But you just got to add the right players around them. But with the Greek Freak, again, just high impact. It's going to affect the game in multiple categories in fantasy. 5.8 assists per game. I would like to see that up a bit. Get me 7. I'll be happy with that. But that's just being greedy, y'all. But at the end of the day, we shooting for how to improve them stats. 55.3% from the field, 29.3% from threes. You know, in a categories-based league, if you're drafting him, he's not going to help your team in regards to 3-point percentage because he's not going to hit at a higher rate, but he's still going to be a player that's going to win you most categories anyways because of what he is doing statistically in other categories. So if you're having doubts about drafting him in a categories-based league because he's not a great 3-point shooter, let those doubts go. He is a player you draft in all formats. Format proof, in my opinion, okay? 72.2% from the free throw line. I thought it would be worse, but it's much better than what I expected. I would love to see him at least reach for 75 next season. And, you know, he's hardworking, so it's not impossible for him to do so. 3.3 turnovers per game is not bad. Again, you know that the turnovers may be slightly higher because high usage rate. He has the ball in his hands a lot. But 3.3 is really not that bad when you want to compare assist to turnover ratio. It may be, but from a fantasy standpoint, he's impacting your team in so many other categories that his assist to turnover ratio is not going to hurt your team. You know that when you draft him, you're not focused on the fact that, hey, he's only going to give me 5 assists, almost 4 turnovers, and his 3-point percentage is going to be low. No, because he's doing some things. Like, there may be some games where he's going to get you 16 rebounds. You just make sure when you're building around players like the Greek Freak and Joker, you just build the right players around him. When you're in a dynasty, you have to consider that. And obviously in other formats, if it's a categories-based league and you need someone who's going to shoot a better percentage than the Greek Freak, you target someone who makes up for those categories. But again, he impacts the game in so many different categories that it's not going to hurt your team. So don't stress over that. 1.1 steals per game and 1.4 blocks per game. So again, going to help your team in so many different categories. Again, high impact player. We love high impact players. He is that guy, and that's why you draft him. Now, most people will be surprised that I have Joel Embiid as my 3rd ranked player in fantasy. Yes, he had a hell of a season. Probably hasn't been ranked that high. Never had him in my rankings, but he showed me a lot this year. And even though they added Harden to me is so inconsistent. You don't know what you're going to get at times. And Embiid has shown me that he can carry that team and he can do it at a high level and be efficient. Okay, usage rate high as hell. Their best player by far, and he's a player that you invest in fantasy because he's going to do what? He's going to win you games. Let's talk about his stats for the 2021-2022 season. Played 68 games. That is a career high. Obviously, Embiid has had issues in the past of staying healthy. This season, 68 games, he's moving in the right direction for me. And he just took over the game most nights, which helped your team in fantasy. It did. He averaged 30.6 points per game, 11.7 rebounds, right then and there. A double-double. And it's not one of those weak, 10 double-doubles. No, it's a high double-double. It's a very, very, very impactful double-double, meaning 30.6 points. I mean, you're giving me 30 points and you're giving me 11, 12 rebounds per game. That is amazing. And 4.2 assists. He's not bringing the ball up the court and initiating the offense like Joker does. But again, that offense is going to run through him because he is their guy. Even with Harden, okay? Harden, you don't know if he's going to be there next season or whatnot, but you do know Embiid will be there. 49.9% from the field. And he very good. I want to see it get back over 50. 37.1% from threes, which is very good. That's a very good percentage for me for my center. And again, I want to see Joker get there because you see where Embiid is at, and that's very good. That to me helps when it comes to a categories-based league, and you're like, I want my center to be able to shoot and do multiple things, and also have a very good 3-point percentage. 37% is very good for a big. He shoots 81.4% from the free throw line, which is very good. Very good 3-point and field goal and free throw percentage, and he averages 3.1 turnovers. Again, he is doing so much that is not going to hurt your team in the categories-based league overall. The top players on most night are going to carry your team, and if you drafted Embiid, he carried your team, and you most likely didn't even draft him in the top 5. Well, he's in my top 5 for a reason, because he's just that dude. You know, if you doubted him as a center, don't doubt him. He's definitely that guy. Candidate for MVP. These 3 guys are candidates for MVP, and also Embiid is going to affect the game on defense. 1.5 blocks and 1.1 steals per game. He's in my top 3 and in my top 5 for those reasons. And again, these 3 guys this past season had the most impact on the game from a fantasy standpoint. I mean, they carried your team. That's the type of players you look for in your top 5. Sure, there were some other guys who stepped it up this season and are in the top 10 rankings at the end of the season, but Embiid should be considered a top 5 player in fantasy, and we just need to start ranking him as so. Coming in at number 4, LeBron James. Now, in a dynasty league, I don't necessarily say you go for LeBron because he is definitely getting up there in age at 37. But redraft, DFS, guess what? LeBron James may be 37, but he is still playing exceptionally well. How many 37-year-olds average 30.3 points per game? Not many. Only played 56 games. Starting to see more injuries and missing more time, so that may be a concern. But again, LeBron James, until he shows me otherwise, he's going to always be ranked in my top 5 because he performs as such. When you see the rankings going into the fantasy basketball season, he's never ranked in the top 5 anymore. And he is a top 5 player still in the NBA, in my opinion, and in fantasy because he's going to affect the game in so many different categories. He's averaging 8.2 rebounds per game, 6.2 assists, and shoots 52.4% from the field, which are all great. He's a player who potentially will get you a triple-double, okay? And do it at a high rate, which means it's not going to be a low end where you just get the points you need to get a triple-double. No, it's going to be well over 10 points, 30 points, 12 rebounds, throw in 14 assists. That's the kind of player LeBron still is at 37, which is why he will be in my top 5 until he retires or until I see some serious decline statistically, okay? Hasn't declined statistically at all, even in fantasy. Just still a tremendous player. He shoots 35.9% from threes, which is respectable for LeBron, especially at this stage of his career. 75.6% from the free throw line, which isn't bad. I've seen worse from him. 3.5 turnovers per game, which again isn't too bad. 1.3 steals per game and 1.1 blocks per game. He is still a stat stuffer. He's still doing a lot. And I've watched people pass over him at pick 5, at pick 6. LeBron should be drafted, if nothing else, in the top 10 of your fantasy basketball drafts. Until he says, I'm hanging it up, or until you see some major decline in his production statistically in fantasy, you continue to draft him with confidence because you know that he's going to produce. The only thing you have to be concerned about is the amount of games. 56, 45, 67, 55 over the last few seasons. That's obviously not great. We had one season due to COVID. We understand that. But, the injuries are starting to show up more. So that will be the only concern. And that will be the main reason I may not look at him in a dynasty. But in redraft, I am drafting him all day. If I am at the 4th or the 5th spot, I am doing it. If Nikola, the Greek Freak, or Embiid are off the board, I'm drafting LeBron because I still know and believe in his talent and what he is going to do from a fantasy standpoint statistically, whether that is in a categories-based league or in a points-based league. He's going to impact the game and help you win. So you continue to draft him with confidence, especially in your redraft leagues. Coming in at number 5, I have Luka. That's right, Luka. Okay, one of the main reasons I have him in my top 5 is because the stats. I'm telling you, although he started this past season off a bit slow and then obviously missed a lot of time due to injuries, which affected his rankings, he is still tremendous. He's a player who's going to almost and most likely get a triple-double. So there'll be nights where he flirts with a triple-double, and there's nights where he's going to get a triple-double. And that's the kind of player who's going to have a high impact on your team in all formats. And you draft them. And you draft them with confidence, okay? 2021-2022 season. Played 65 games. Averaged 28.4 points per game, which is great. 9.1 rebounds, which is obviously great. And 8.7 assists per game, which is definitely awesome, which means there's going to be several nights where he's going to get you a triple-double. I've seen games where he's had like 12, 13 rebounds, and I'm like, yes, do it for me. Yes. And that's the kind of players you look for in your fantasy leagues. And even if you were drafting him as the cornerstone of your dynasty team in fantasy basketball, it's a smart move because he's young, and you already know that obviously the Mavs are investing in him long-term. And he's a great player for you to invest in long-term in fantasy because he's going to have a high impact on your team statistically in all categories. And that's the kind of player you want. 8.7 assists. Again, you see that's high. Look at that. That's amazing. 45.7% from the field, which is solid. 35.3% 3-point field goal percentage, which is solid. I want to see him hit 38. I need him at 38. That'll be even better. 74.4% free throw percentage. That has to increase. He should be at 80 and above. So I'm looking forward to seeing him hit that 80. Turnovers is a slight negative at 4.5, almost 5 turnovers per game, which can have a negative impact on your team. But he still has a positive assist to turnover ratio when you look at the amount of assists he's averaging per game versus his turnovers. And again, there are going to be nights where he's going to have a triple-double and he's going to have about 12, 13 assists. And again, he has a high usage rate. He has the ball in his hands a lot. He is the best player on the Mavs. He is their playmaker. He is the guy. So you expect the turnover ratio to be slightly higher than most. But again, if you have a player like Luka, you have a chance to win. That's the kind of players we look for. Yeah, there are players who will appear to have great stats, but these players are not helping you win games in fantasy. And you're looking for players who are going to, 1, help you win games, and 2, put fear in your opponent's heart. Because if I'm going up against a team that has a Joker, I'm a little nervous. If I'm going up against a team who has the Greek Freak, I'm a little stressed there too. I'm nervous. Again, with Embiid, LeBron, Luka, because I know that there is a chance that I'm not going to be able to sustain what they're going to do throughout the week, because there are games where they're going to have 60 something, almost 70 points, and I may not be able to overcome that because there are not a lot of players in this game from a fantasy standpoint who's capable of getting you that many points in a points-based league or affecting multiple categories in a categories-based league at a high level. And it's a positive for these guys, which is why if you have the chance to get any of them, you do so. Okay, you just do. And also with Luka, 1.2 steals per game, which is a great career high in his 3-point percentage, steals and blocks, which means he is just getting better. So in a dynasty league, I am drafting him all day because guess what? He's improving every year, okay? And when you show me that you're improving in 3-point percentage, I'm all for it. So 35.3, next season, he may be at 37, which will be great for you in fantasy basketball. All right, y'all, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and make sure your notifications are turned on so you can see my 6 through 10 fantasy basketball early 2022-2023 player rankings. Also, leave some comments and let me know if we got it right on our top 5 players going into the 2022-2023 fantasy basketball season, and let me know your top 5 players going into the 2022-2023 fantasy basketball season. Peace.
Thanks for listening to The Score Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to The Score for more fun and great advice on how to win at fantasy basketball. And if you've got comments or questions about The Score, send them to waiverwirequeen@gmail.com. The Score.